I've driven long-haul trucks for years, crisscrossing the country from coast to coast. Most nights, I'm alone on the road, just me, my rig, and the hum of the engine. It's a life of solitude, but I've learned to love it. The open road is my sanctuary. But one night changed everything. It was late October, and the air had grown chilly, a stark contrast to the warm days of summer. I was on Route 66, a stretch of highway steeped in legend, heading towards a small town called Crescent Hills. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the desolate landscape. I had just filled up at a roadside diner, sipping coffee as I reviewed my route, when something compelled me to take a back road instead of sticking to the main highway. The first few miles were fine, the road smooth and clear. I cranked up the radio, letting the classic rock fill the cab. It was a familiar rhythm, a comforting soundtrack to my journey. But then the atmosphere shifted. The music faded as I entered a patch of thick fog, enveloping my truck like a ghostly shroud. I squinted through the windshield, gripping the wheel tighter. Just a little fog, I muttered to myself, trying to shake off the unease creeping in. But the fog grew thicker, swirling like a living thing. I slowed down, my headlights slicing through the mist, illuminating only a few feet in front of me. Suddenly, I saw her, a figure standing by the side of the road. I slammed on the brakes, the truck screeching to a halt. My heart raced as I tried to process what I was seeing. She was a girl, maybe 14 or 15, dressed in a tattered white dress that fluttered around her like a ghostly veil. Her hair hung long and unkempt, framing a face that was pale and expressionless. What the hell? I whispered to myself, my instincts screaming at me to drive away. But I couldn't. Something about her drew me in, a morbid curiosity that kept me rooted to the spot. Hey! Are you okay? I called out, my voice echoing in the silence. She didn't respond, just stood there, her gaze fixed somewhere beyond me. I felt a shiver run down my spine as the temperature dropped even further. As I watched, she began to walk towards me, her feet barely touching the ground. I felt a chill wash over me, a premonition that something was terribly wrong. I wanted to turn the ignition and drive off, but my body felt frozen in place. Please, just go home, I said, my voice shaky. It's late out here. But she continued to approach, her eyes hollow and haunting. Just then, the radio crackled to life, the static slicing through the silence. The voice was distorted, barely intelligible, but I could make out a few words. Don't stay, her name is. I jerked back, trying to turn the radio off, but it blared louder, drowning out my thoughts. I could feel her presence closing in, and in a moment of sheer panic, I finally managed to snap out of it. I slammed the gearshift into reverse and floored it, throwing gravel as I sped away, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't dare look back as I raced down the foggy road, gripping the wheel as if it were a lifeline. I could still feel the cold grip of dread wrapping around my throat. My mind raced with questions. Who was she? Why was she out there? After a few minutes, the fog began to thin, and I finally dared to breathe. I checked the GPS on my phone, trying to regain my bearings. Just as I was starting to calm down, I caught a glimpse of her in my rearview mirror, standing in the middle of the road, illuminated by my headlights. My blood ran cold. I swerved to avoid her, but the truck began to skid. I wrestled with the wheel, trying to regain control. The world outside blurred into a whirlwind of fog and fear. Somehow, I managed to right the truck, but my heart was racing, and my hands shook uncontrollably. I drove for what felt like hours, finally arriving at Crescent Hills. The town was small, just a few streetlights flickering in the darkness. I pulled into a gas station, desperately needing to collect my thoughts. As I filled the tank, I glanced around, half expecting to see her lurking in the shadows. Hey, man, you okay? The attendant asked, eyeing me warily. I must have looked like a ghost. Just saw something on the road, I said, trying to shake off the unease. A girl. She was out there in the fog. The attendant's expression shifted, a knowing look in his eyes. You saw her, didn't you? The girl in white? What do you mean? I demanded, my heart racing again. Legend has it she wanders these roads, looking for something, he said, his voice low. Some say she died in a crash years ago. Others say she was lost and never found her way home. Drivers see her all the time, but she only appears in the fog. I felt a chill creep over me. What happens if you see her? The attendant looked away, his gaze distant. Some say she brings bad luck. Others say if you stop, she'll want a ride. But it's best not to engage. Just keep driving. I could feel the weight of his words settling in my stomach. I didn't stop. I just saw her. He nodded, looking more serious. That's good. If she comes back, don't stop. Just keep going. I finished pumping gas, my mind racing with fear and disbelief. I climbed back into my truck, the cab feeling both familiar and alien. I started the engine, ready to leave Crescent Hills behind, but the thought of hitting that fog again filled me with dread. As I drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had escaped something. The highway opened up before me, and I kept my speed up, desperate to put distance between me and that ghostly figure. But just as I was starting to relax, the fog returned, rolling in like a thick blanket. My stomach dropped, and I gripped the wheel tightly, my heart pounding. I turned up the radio to drown out my thoughts, hoping to chase away the creeping fear. That's when I saw her again, standing in the middle of the road. My heart stopped. No! Not again! I shouted, panic flooding my veins. The headlights illuminated her figure, and I could see her hair billowing in the wind, her dress fluttering like a tattered flag. I had only a split second to decide. There was no way I could stop. I slammed on the brakes, swerving to avoid her. The truck skidded again, but this time, I was ready. I regained control and barreled past her, my heart racing as I glanced in the rearview mirror. She stood there, still watching, her face expressionless. A chill settled in my bones as I realized I was no longer just driving, I was running from something. I pressed the accelerator, desperate to escape. The fog seemed to thicken again, wrapping around me like a shroud. I felt a sense of urgency, as if she were calling to me, urging me to stop. I fought against the urge to look back. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours, but eventually, the fog began to thin. My heart finally started to slow as I saw the glow of city lights ahead. I had made it out. Once I reached a safe area, I pulled over and took a deep breath. The night air was crisp, but it felt cleaner here, devoid of the haunted weight of that stretch of road. I glanced at the time, realizing how late it had gotten. I vowed never to take those back roads again. Some legends are best left untested. As I sat there, trying to calm my racing heart, I couldn't shake the feeling that the girl in white would always be a part of me, a shadow lurking just beyond the edges of my memory. From that night on, every time I hit the road, I'd keep an eye on the fog, always wondering if I'd see her again. And even now, as I drive through lonely stretches of highway, I keep my foot on the gas, hoping to outrun the specter of that haunted night.